Further discussion. Gentleman from Cole, what purpose do you rise?
To inquire of the amendment maker.
Lady from Laclede, do you yield?
Yes.
Proceed.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what your bill does. It eliminates the need or the mandates for public schools and private schools, correct?
Private and parochial.
Private and parochial, not public. It also, we still have the medical exemption and did have that. So if anybody had a medical reason, they could go to their doctors and get the exemption.
Right, but doctors are penalized if they fill that out now.
Well,
so
but
my bill covers that too.
And I know doctors, and you're telling me they're all penalized. I don't. That's your opinion. But okay, now.
Do you know any that give a medical exemption?
I know my doctors, and I trust. If I went to them, I trust what they would give me. Now, the second part of it is you had religious exemptions, and that's now.
Religious or conscientious, just like the
conscientious is new. Conscientious is new, isn't it?
Correct.
And that's substantially different. Religious, they have religious exemption. Conscientious means anybody who wants one can get one. All you have to say is, I conscientiously don't want my kids to take a vaccine, so it makes it totally voluntary.
So would you rather them lie?
No, I'm just asking you. That's what.
What the Missouri Constitution says, Article 1?
No. I'm just asking you some simple questions.
It says religious and conscientious together.
It's conscious objection.
Same sentence.
And that means everybody has an absolute right not to take the vaccine.
Right.
Okay, so that's a change. That's the main change right there.
One word, conscientious.
Right, and so we now went to totally vaccination.
What?
So we now went to totally, it's voluntary.
Yes.
Now, you're also, you talked about you care for children. So I'm looking at some of that they did before. Meningitis, that can harm children, can it not?
Yes.
Polio can harm children. Measles can harm children. Mumps can harm children. Rubella can harm children. Everything they're vaccinating for could harm children.
The vaccines can harm children too.
But getting the disease can. And we went through the time when we had a lot of it. The other part is that causes me some concern is I have grandchildren. I had children. I still take my grandchildren sometimes to the doctor when they're very little, 2 and 3 years old, before they're able to get these vaccines and everything, which I want them to have. My children want them to have. But suddenly they go to a doctor's office and they can be exposed. A baby is 6 months, 8 months, a year old can be exposed to measles and everything else, and they're not even old enough to protect themselves and get a vaccine. Don't we have a little bit of a moral obligation to help protect those around us and not to expose them to what our desires are and the risk we can bring them? Or is there no moral obligation to the public as a whole, but it's all about what I want?
No.
That's what I'm asking. Is that what it's about? Do you feel that you have an obligation to help protect the other children that your children come in contact with?
No, but most doctors won't see unvaccinated children, so you're safe.
But I just asked you a question.
And guess what?
Don't you feel that you have an obligation?
Aren't as sick as vaccinated children.
Don't you feel that you have an obligation to also protect the other people's children just from what your wants are? Or it's all about, I don't want a vaccine and I don't care what happens to your kids because we don't live in isolation. We're everywhere. We saw what happened with mumps. I've seen people that had polio. You haven't seen anybody had polio in the last 20 years, have you?
But what good is herd immunity?
But that's because we vaccinated. Have you seen anybody?
Do you believe in herd immunity?
I believe that we eliminated medical conditions.
Do you believe? Do you believe herd immunity, like the CDC and all that says? We have 99.9% in Missouri right now.
On COVID?
On childhood vaccines. That's what my amendment's about. Childhood vaccines.
And we are still seeing new cases of measles and that coming out again. Do we want polio back? Do you know
the root cause of those measles outbreaks? Can you point it back to an unvaccinated child that's not an immigrant?
Well, if they're vaccinated or not, we know the vaccinated ones are not getting it. And if I'm going to blame everything on Mexico, let's worry. If we don't care enough to protect our neighbors' kids, why should we worry what Mexico cares about us? All I'm saying is that I know that we went through terrible times, and I've known people had polio. I've lost an aunt. I've known people that had smallpox. I've known people that had the different pneumonia or measles and that, chickenpox, and what the results are. And we brought them under control by vaccines.
And we'll continue to have them under control. It's 1% of the population that deserves a right to choose.
You know, I listened to one of these hearings, and I didn't see that many doctors coming in against it. I don't know. Was there any medical associations in favor of your amendment?
No. And do those same ones get paid for vaccinations? Do pharmacists get paid for vaccinations? Yes. Does Big Pharma?
Do you get paid in your job?
Yes.
And do you do your job honestly and sincerely and with the patient's best interest at heart?
Yes.
But all these doctors and pharmacists are just a bunch of crooks.
Not all doctors agree. Do you want me to send you all the ones that don't agree?
No, I'm just talking about you're blaming.
I have a binder this thick.
You're saying these doctors are all crooked because they want the money.
No.
But you're honest.
I'm not saying any doctor is crooked.
Your position again is that your child, you have a right to have your child non-vaccinated, but I don't have a right. But that doesn't mean that you care about what happens to my child when they come in contact with your child. We live in a society where it is not total freedom. We have to strive to total freedom. So if I decide I want to kill somebody, I should be able to kill them? It's freedom.
I'm not changing that law, sir.
But if I want to drive 80 miles an hour, I like driving 80 miles an hour. Should be okay. Should be okay.
Well, if you don't get caught.
So I guess I understand it now. Morally, everything's okay if we don't get caught. It's okay to violate the law, but not.
Those rules are there because it's safety. And most people abide by them.
Well, as it is, if someone has a medical, as it was, if someone had a medical reason not to have the vaccine, they didn't have to take it.
Right.
And if you had a truly religious belief against it, you didn't have to take it.
But the exemption process is not that easy. Health departments have overstepped their bounds and made it ridiculous to get the exemption form.
Leave out the word conscientious and fix the system. If it's broke, fix it.
What's wrong with conscientious?
Because that means anybody can voluntarily not have their children vaccinated.
So they lie and say it's for religious reasons. What's the difference?
Well, I have a certain belief in that some people will try to be honest. I still believe the average American is honest.
That's why I put conscientious in there, so they could be honest. I fixed it. Thank you.
Because I had to, anybody can say they have a conscientious belief, and there's no way to disprove it.
Let me tell you what, there's 547 moms that want this legislation, and they are not lazy. They have done their research. They have worked diligently, and they deserve this. They've been trying to get this, some of them, for 20 years.
547
and
moms.
And guess what?
Amongst how many moms are in Cole County, Missouri?
Then what's it going to hurt?
States?
If it's 547 across the whole state of Missouri, who's it going to hurt?
Well,
you have more chances of your children coming in contact with an unvaccinated child. You have more chances to win the lottery.
If my child gets hurt because someone else doesn't want to go...
I'm sure you'll be happy to sue them.
I probably would, but odds are they'd figure out a way. If that's their standards, they wouldn't have any money anyway, so I'd be not solving the problem.
So when are we going to start making people get HIV tests or HIV vaccines? Where does it stop? What are we going to stop?
These have worked. We're not talking about those. We're talking about these right in front of us.
Well, people get HIV every day.
Well, we'll cross that bridge and address it how it is on its own merits.
But should the Department of Health and Senior Services be able to put any vaccine on there they want?
Well, let's cross them when they put new ones on there and address them then.
No, let's make them come to the legislature for approval.
I enjoy the freedom of taking my kids to a ball game and taking them out places.
Well, do it because you're not going to run into unvaccinated kids.
And when there was COVID...
Why do you live in so much fear? They're not coming after you.
I'm not saying you're coming after me. I'm saying I want to be able to take my kids in an environment that I believe is as safe as we can make it.
Do they lick handrails? I mean, why do you think... Do you think if you walk past an unvaccinated child, you're automatically going to get sick?
If we were perfectly safe without vaccines, why did we even ever have them? Did any of these...
They do a good thing for 99% of the people.
Then let's keep doing it.
They're great. But let's give rights to the 1%.
If they have a medical reason not to, I have no problem.
Or a conscientious or a religious reason.
Conscientious just means I don't want to.
You know what? For every mandate, there should be an exemption process. We live in the United States of America, where we should be free.
Everything I conscientiously object to, every law out there, I should be able to ignore.
No.
I conscientiously
but
disagree.
There's exemptions.
I think
hey,
I have
look, you said going 80 miles an hour. Okay, I should get a ticket for that. But you know what? I still have the right to go in front of the judge and debate that $80 ticket.
That.
Or that 80-mile-an-hour ticket, because we have rights.
We are going to agree to disagree, but I like the freedom that I have taking my children out in what I think is a fairly safe society. When COVID was everywhere, I kept my grandkids very isolated. I didn't like to, but and I am happy to say that COVID vaccines are out there now, so I can feel safe.
Well, great. I'm glad you feel safe. I don't believe in the COVID vaccine.
No. I also suggest that one is...
Where's your mask then?
Pardon?
If you believe everything the government tells you, where's your mask?
I've never said that. I've never said that. Have I ever said I believe everything the government tells me?
No, but what's wrong with giving 1% an exemption that they deserve without going through hoops and hoops?
You have nothing that says you're giving 1% the exemption. You are giving everybody who wants one exemption. When you put the word conscientious in there, you've given a blanket exemption. And that's the point that I object to.
So then the rest of them are just going to lie and say it's religion. How do you know what somebody's religion is?
I ask you this. If one of your children get some measles or something worse, and you take them to the doctor and they happen to contaminate some other children in there, isn't that going to cause you some grave emotional distress?
Yes, but these unvaccinated moms that are fully educated will not take their children to the doctor for measles half the time until they absolutely have to. And then they will let them know ahead of time that they think it's the measles. These are not reckless, crazy moms.
Is that in your bill, that they can't go to the doctor? That they can't use their kids and not...
But don't you respect the Constitution of the state of Missouri? Why is religious and conscientious?
I live that Constitution and I believe in it. And I believe it in just more...
Religious and conscientious is right beside each other. Why are they in the same sentence if they don't hold the same value?
We have a constitutional right to freedom. We have a constitutional right to,
And we have one to vaccines, or we should.
Just out of curiosity, how are you... Well, we won't go there. The same way I won't go to the immigration and all this stuff. I notice your votes aren't that constitutional when it talks about right to a jury trial, but we won't go there.
What? I believe in a jury trial. What are you talking about?
Well, generally, let's not go there. Let's stick to where we're at. And I respect your position. I know you believe it. I've listened to your arguments, and I believe just as strongly that the lack of vaccines is going to be bad for our state and bad for our children. Thank you.
You're welcome.